Hey guys, what's going on? I'm Ryan Fenders. Welcome back to the Fentertainment channel. On today's video, we're going to be installing some two-wheel drive lift spindles on my 2004 Chevrolet Silverado. I took the lift spindles off of my single cab. I've had those spindles on it for a few years now, but today we're going to be installing the lift spindles. It's a 3.5-inch lift spindle, and it's going to make the tire stick out a little bit, so just know that. You probably already know that if you're thinking about getting lift spindles. These are 265, 65, 18. This is a factory GM tire from like a 2016 model, and the tire that I'm going to be replacing it with is a 275, 70, 18 BFG all-terrain. So the height of the extended cab in its stock form right here, this has not been raised or lowered. With the 265, 60, 18s. From the ground to the bottom of the fender well, we're at 33 and 3/8 of an inch tall. That's on the passenger side. We're at 33 inches tall. So give or take, that's a 3/8 inch leaning towards the driver's side. That could just be the Chevy lean. Now, these are the knuckles we're going to be using. These are lift spindles here. This is where your hub goes at with the 3 bolts. And you see it's got a much longer shaft here. This portion on the upper spindle, that's what gives it the lift. And you can also see how it kind of pokes the wheel out, making the track width a little bit wider once you install these. That's going to be good. I'm going to put the jack stand between the transmission cross member and this front bracket here, and gently let down the jack. Pull the wheel off. All right guys, this right here is my brake caliper bolt here, and I need to remove it. However, if you're working on a 99 to 07, 9 times out of 10, it's going to be a T55 Torx head. However, when I replaced my brakes when I first got this truck, I went ahead and put a different style bolt on there. Once you have these 2 bolts here loose, we're going to go ahead and remove the brake assembly here. These are the 2 bolts that we removed from the brake here. We want to go ahead and put those aside and don't lose them. Once you get to this step and you have the brake caliper removed from the brake assembly itself, I like to go ahead and set it up here for the time being. Next, we need to remove the caliper bracket here. Now, in order to remove this brake caliper bracket here away from the factory spindle, it takes an 18mm socket. See the top bolt there? The bottom one's off camera, you can't see it, but it's just below it. Brake caliper bracket. Now, before we go any further, we need to hang the brake caliper up. How I'm gonna do that is I've got an old metal clothes hanger here. I'm gonna take the hook and put it through one of the bolt slots here. I'm gonna take the very top portion and put it on top of the shock tower. And that should give me enough support there to hold this right here up. You can do it 2 ways. You can take the rotor off now while it's attached to the spindle and attached to the truck. Probably be the easiest way. Or you can wait till the spindle is all the way detached and then take it off. However, it's easier to do it while it's on the truck because the spindle is mounted and you don't have to worry about holding the spindle still in order to try to get the hub assembly off. In order to get the hub assembly off, it's going to be a 15mm. I'm using the top of the jack. If you've seen in an earlier clip where the jack looked like the handle was very short, it is. I took the top off and I'm using the top as a leverage bar. I'm going to slide that on here and push down. That one is broke loose. Next on deck, we need to remove the upper ball joint. We need to remove the lower ball joint, and we need to break loose the tie rod. Now you can go in any order. There's only 3 more bolts left to do in those 3. So to start with, I have a 3/4 inch wrench. You can break loose the upper ball joint and your tie rod in with it. And on the lower ball joint, it's a little bit bigger. It takes a 24mm. I'm gonna start with the lower ball joint. Lower ball joint is loose already. Next, I'm gonna do the tie rod since it's right here. We're gonna need to go ahead and smack the old spindle here with a hammer. You can use a pickle fork here, but chances are you'll mess up the tie rod or the upper and lower ball joints. So we're not gonna hit this at all. We're gonna hit right here. As soon as I turn the camera off, I hit it one more time. The ball joint or the tie rod itself popped out of the spindle here. Okay, we have the upper ball joint loose. We have the lower ball joint loose. We have the tie rod broke loose here. Next on deck, we're not going to remove the sway bar or the sway bar link. We're not going to remove the shock or the spring. By doing this, once we have the upper ball joint and lower ball joint loosened and removed, the lower control arm will stay in place. The spring will not fly out because the shock's holding it in place, the sway bar's holding it in place. Next, I'm gonna go ahead and try to break loose the top of the ball joint here with the hammer in the lower ball joint. Now the upper ball joint, I'm gonna try to hit it right here as much as I can. Pull those cables out of the way as much as you can there. We don't wanna hit those cables. And on the lower portion of the ball joint, we kind of wanna hit it around this area right here, on the other side as well. There it goes, the upper one just fell. The lower one is also loose. Now we just got to remove the bolts and we'll be able to take the spindle all the way off. Harness here runs down and is connected to the hub assembly. We'll go ahead and remove that clip. Here's the harness I wanted you to disconnect here. This goes to the hub assembly. What I'm gonna do is just slide this so you can check it out. Last thing I have to do to remove this spindle is loosen the lower ball joint. Now the lower ball joint may spin when you're removing the nut itself. Don't worry. This is an Allen key here and it's gonna go in the bottom of the ball joint, and you can hold the ball joint in place while you take the nut off away from the ball joint. Now we went ahead and broke loose all the other ones. It's only two more. I went ahead and put it on my drill. Remove those. Next we got to get it away from the spindle itself. There's probably 1,000 different methods. I just don't want to go banging on this piece right here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this right here, pry bar, and I'm going to pry it between the hub mount itself and the spindle. I'm gonna knock it into place and try to work it loose. That's working out fine. Okay. Alright guys, there's your lift spindle. Put it in place, put it back onto your rotor there. Okay, put the bolts back into place. And before we use the drill to put them in place, we want to hand tighten it. Now, we're not going to tighten them up like that just yet. We're going to wait till the spindle and knuckles back onto the truck, and then we're going to give them a good tighten then. All right, go ahead and grab your nut for your lower ball joint here. And now what I'm gonna do is one-handed, I'm gonna try to install the lower spindle onto the lower portion of the ball joint. I'm not gonna worry about the upper ball joint or your tie rod just yet. I'm gonna do this enough just to get this right here nut started. All right, that's done. Next, grab your Allen key to hold your ball joint still while you tighten your lower ball joint. You want to tighten it up just a little bit to get some of this slack out of it. So 24 millimeter, and grab your Allen key. When I say the Allen key, we're going to take the Allen key and we're going to put it into the lower ball joint just like that. Okay, and then we'll take your wrench, which is your 24 millimeter, we'll slide it up the Allen key and onto the ball joint. Okay, and you'll hold the Allen key with one hand and tighten the nut with the other. That's what I'm talking about. That's what I'm trying to show you. Now that we have majority of the slack from the lift spindle bolted down, what you could do is go ahead, and we need to raise the upper control arm enough to slide the ball joint through the spindle. If you need to, get yourself a pry bar in order to do that. Like so. Pop it into place like that. Take the pry bar and go back down. Once you have that, you can take your nut, put it on the upper ball joint, just enough to keep it in place. The upper ball joint is tightened. It's not all the way tight. The bottom isn't all the way tight either. We got a lot of this slack out. I'm gonna go ahead and take the nut off of the tie rod that we put back on there so we wouldn't lose it. Place the tie rod back in this place here. Put the nut on. When you're tightening up the upper and lower ball joint, you might need an Allen key to help hold the ball joint while you're tightening up the nut on both of them. If so, the larger one fits the bottom of the ball joint, and it's a number 8. And the smaller one fits the upper one, and it's a number 6. All right, the new spindle is installed. And before we run any of these cables here, or this, or put that back on, we need to put the rotor back on, put the brake caliper mount back on, put the brake caliper back on. Then we'll run all of these wires here. Remember to put the clips back on it. Opposite corners. Go ahead and put your bolts back in for that. Slide the brakes back on there. That's just water. Okay. Get your other nut, bolt, put it on. Slide this over here. Put our caliper bolts in. That's good. Also, don't forget we need to tighten the rotor bolts from the back. That's going to be a 15 millimeter. Okay, we have that done. We have pretty much everything tightened now. Next thing we're going to do, put this back in place. Now on the driver's side, once it's lifted with the tires, we're getting 37 inches to the bottom of the fender well. On the passenger side, getting 37.5 inches tall. Some trimming will be necessary. On this lower valence here, I took the sawzall and I cut straight down because there was a piece that came out and curved back, and by doing that the tire would hit that piece. So this right here just cuts it off flush. You know, it's not no big V cut here. That's what I used there. Now on the inside of the wheel well, you have your windshield washer reservoir is down here, and the tire will hit it. The inner fender was also trimmed about 3 inches, so you need to trim that as well. I did the same thing on the passenger side. I just went ahead and pretty much cut it straight down from the bumper itself. On the inside, I cut off about 3 inches of the inside fender portion. This tire does not hit this inner fender at all on the passenger side. Now, as you can tell, we're on the driver's side of the truck. This 275/70/18 is like 33.2 inches tall, and it will rub on the windshield washer fluid box here, and you might need to relocate that. This is what the truck will sound like when the tire hits it in reverse. It's only when the wheels turn to the right